I knew I was screwed the moment Mayor Asher Crowe set the collar on the table, and I heard the lock click, even though no one had touched it yet. The sound was small, barely louder than the hum of the air vents, but it skipped along my spine like a cold finger. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. Stress, obviously. Too little sleep, too many deadlines, too much coffee, and not enough common sense. But the collar just sat there on the polished black surface of his desk, in the middle of a neat semicircle of paper files and one sleek tablet that was, unfortunately, displaying my face. Without the mask. Without the hoodie. Without the cheap glasses. Just me. I forced my gaze away from that screen, and took in the rest of the office, because, if I stared at my own doomed expression any longer, I'd probably puke. Top floor of City Hall. Floor-to-ceiling glass on two sides, pouring the neon-stained night into the room. The city sprawled below us, towers and traffic and hollow ads flickering in the haze, like something he owned. The lighting inside was warm, soft amber from sculptural lamps instead of cold fluorescence. But it didn't help. No matter how cozy the bulbs tried to be, the air felt colder in here than it did on the street in midwinter. Maybe that was just him. Asher Crowe leaned back in his chair, big hands folded loosely over his stomach. Watching me the way you watch a puzzle you've already mostly solved. He was the exact kind of alpha the city loved. Tall, broad-shouldered, posture so perfect it could cut you, dark hair smoothed back without a strand out of place. His shirt was crisp white, his tie knife black, his suit jacket open. Like he'd just loosened it after a long day of ruling the world. The eyes ruined everything. Not because they were ugly, they weren't. They were a cool, steel gray that should have felt neutral and instead saw through skin. He could smile softly. That was the worst part. On campaign posters, on charity galas, on holo broadcasts. He had this practiced. Gentle curve of his mouth that said, "I care, tell me your problems." Right now, that same mouth was tilted in something like amusement. "Mr. Reyes," he said smoothly, "you look disappointed." "It's Jay," I replied. My voice only cracked once, which I chose to see as a victory. "And no, this is all very on brand, actually. I'd be concerned if a surprise summons to your office ended with, I don't know, cake." "I can have cake arranged," he said, like he meant it. "Though I doubt sugar will fix your situation." His tone was calm, almost kind. Sincere even. The slight condescension in it was so subtle you could miss it if you weren't listening for it. I was always listening for it. I sat as straight as I could in the leather chair opposite him, resisting the urge to tug at the collar of my cheap shirt. I'd come straight from the newsroom, still smelling faintly of ink and burnt coffee. My clothes were plain by design. Black jeans, gray button-up, worn boots. The kind of outfit people's eyes slide over. Apparently, not his. On the desk between us, the collar waited patiently. It wasn't decorative. Not one of those fashionable leather accessories you saw in Omega lifestyle feeds. This was matte black, lined with embedded metal, its edges smooth and official. On the outside, at the center, the stylized sigil of the mayor's office gleamed in silver. On the inside, I knew there would be a chip, registration, ownership, protective status, a digital leash hooked directly into the city's systems. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Just to clarify," I said, "this is not a kink thing, right?" One of his eyebrows lifted. "Do you wish it were?" I snorted. "Not in the way you're hoping, Your Honor." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You assume a lot about what I hope." "I assume a lot about alphas who invite unbonded omegas to their offices at night and put collars on the table," I said. "Call it pattern recognition." On the left side of the desk, a stack of printed documents sat in a neat clip. I could read the top page upside down. Enforcement report. Omega movement violations. On the right, the tablet glowed softly with my file. I caught words like unbonded, no registered patron, and the one that made my stomach clench, investigative interest. Somewhere deeper in the document I knew, there would be freezing little phrases, like risk of instability and recommended transfer, isolation center. Because that was our city in a nutshell. Housing? Alpha controlled. Jobs that mattered? Alpha approved. Healthcare? Don't get me started. And if you were an Omega without a protector, you weren't an adult, you were a potential crime scene. "I'm flattered, really," I said, forcing my eyes away from the tablet. "But if this is about an unpaid parking ticket, I should warn you, my lawyer is very scary." "You don't have a lawyer," he said. "You have a burner email, 4 fake addresses on record, and a talent for being in the wrong place at the exact right time." He tapped the tablet once. My face flashed larger. One image in particular, grainy footage from a protest 3 months ago. My features blurred by a mask, but my eyes unmistakable. And, he added casually, you have a pseudonym, Grey Tail. My heart missed a step. Then another. On the outside, I smiled. That sounds like a terrible name, I said lightly. Edgy, try hard, probably writes manifestos in basements. I'd sue for libel if I were him. He ignored that. Or worse, filed it away for later. Your articles, he continued, are very popular for something that technically doesn't exist, Mr. Reyes. Pointed, clever, cruel to me admittedly, but I appreciate the craft. I'll send you a signed copy next time, I muttered. The temperature in the room hadn't changed. My skin thought it had. Sweat prickled under my shirt between my shoulder blades, under the plain collar against my neck. I forced myself not to hunch, not to shrink. You grow up Omega, you learn posture like armor. You're in a difficult position, Asher said, almost gently. Unbonded, politically active, with a demonstrated talent for stirring unrest. You've interfered with several enforcement operations. You have encouraged other Omegas to refuse assigned patrons. I encouraged them to not roll over and play pet, I corrected. Small difference. The law doesn't see it as small. Then the law needs glasses. His eyes cooled a fraction. The law sees an unstable element. And it has remedies for instability. There it was. The pleasant euphemism. Isolation Center 7 has space, he went on, clinical now. You would be evaluated, treated, kept safe from influences. The city would be kept safe from you. You know how it works. I did. Windowless rooms. Sedation. For your own good. Stripped of comms, contacts, identity. Officially, temporary. In practice? People went in and didn't come out the same. If they came out at all. I swallowed again. So, I said, my voice thinner than I liked. Why am I sitting here? Instead of already being drugged and wrapped in a nice padded cell? Because, he said, and his gaze dropped finally to the collar between us. I'm offering you an alternative. He slid it forward, just an inch. I didn't look down. I could feel it anyway. The metal might as well have been a live wire. Legally, he continued, an unprotected Omega with your profile is classified as high risk, but an Omega under official patronage, especially mine, is no longer the system's problem. He's mine, my responsibility, my asset. Your ornament, I said. That too, he allowed. The city outside his windows pulsed and twinkled and did not care. If you accept, he said, your file disappears from the isolation queue. No transfer, no cell, no sedation. You move into my residence, acquire full protected status, and in the eyes of the law, become my Omega. And if I refuse? I asked softly. He didn't smile this time. Refusal, he said, is interpreted as acknowledgement of instability and rejection of a reasonable protective measure. His tone made it clear he'd quoted that line before. In that case, enforcement proceeds as scheduled. So you're telling me, I said, letting the sarcasm drip, because if I didn't laugh I'd scream. My choices are, become the mayor's pet, or disappear into a building with no windows. Those are the options available within the current, imperfect system, he said. I didn't design it. But I do operate it. How noble, I muttered. Is it noble, he asked quietly, to offer you a way to keep writing, breathing, existing, instead of signing the order for your transfer right now? That shut me up more effectively than a hand over my mouth. He watched me, letting the silence stretch. He didn't push. He didn't lean forward, didn't bare his teeth. Just waited, patient as gravity. He thought I'd break. He thought fear would do the rest of the work for him. The thing is, he wasn't wrong. I was afraid. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get out, run, hide, vanish into the twisty alleys of the lower tiers. But that wasn't an option anymore. He had my name, my face, my entire hacked-together life printed and color-coded in front of him. So I did what I always do when panic claws at my ribs. I smiled. Fine, I said lightly. Congratulations, Your Honor. You've acquired yourself a very mouthy houseplant. His eyes narrowed just a little. That's a yes? I reached out before I could think better of it. The collar was cool against my fingertips, heavier than it looked. My skin tingled where the metal brushed it. A faint buzz that crawled up my wrist. Something inside it hummed in answer, a whisper too low to hear but loud enough to make my pulse stutter. For a heartbeat, I wondered if it was reacting to me. To what I was. No. Paranoia. Tech, and nerves. Asher's gaze never left my face as I lifted the collar, brought it to my throat. My hands were steady. I refused to let them shake. Jay, he said quietly, and almost warning. Relax, I said. It's not like this is the worst decision I've made this year. The metal closed around my neck, snug, but not choking. I felt the hidden clasp find its twin, the magnetic pull of mechanism meeting mechanism. The lock clicked. This time, there was no way I imagined it. Something flickered behind his eyes, as the tiny indicator light on the inside of the band warmed against my skin. His system had just registered me, my status flipping from unprotected to claimed in 1,000 databases at once. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Asher rose, slow and deliberate, and walked around the desk. Up close, he was even taller, the lines of his suit cutting sharp shadows under the soft lamplight. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, clean, cool, threaded, with something darker that made my omega instincts twitch in ways I refused to acknowledge. He lifted a hand, gave me plenty of time to flinch. I didn't. His fingers brushed the edge of the collar, then settled briefly against the metal at the hollow of my throat. Heat seeped from his skin into mine. Interesting, he murmured. What? My voice came out a little rough. You wear it like it was your idea. His mouth curved, not quite kind. Most people cry. I'm not most people, I said. And it was my idea. Sort of. You put a gun on the table, I chose which way to point it. His eyes met mine and held. For the first time, the softness in his expression cracked, and I saw the intent beneath it. Not lust, not yet. Possession. Calculation. Curiosity. He looked at me like he'd just gotten his hands on a rare, dangerous animal, and couldn't wait to see if it would bite. Welcome to my protection, Jay Reyes, he said. Try not to regret it. I smiled up at him, baring just enough teeth to count. Oh, I'm sure I will, I said. But if anyone's walking out of this on a leash, Mayor Crowe, it won't be me. Inside, the fear coiled tighter. Underneath it, something else uncurled, reckless, furious, alive. Yeah, I'd put on the collar. But if anyone ended up truly tethered by the end of this, I planned on it being him. By the time the car stopped, my neck had stopped tingling. The collar was still there, a solid cold band under my skin-warmed shirt, but the initial buzz had faded into a low, constant awareness, like when you know someone's staring at you even with your back turned. The door opened before I could decide if I was going to bolt. Mr. Reyes. A deep voice, neutral, outside. I slid out of the back seat and stepped into the underground garage of the mayor's private residence. It wasn't labeled as such, obviously. The building above was officially a mixed-use executive complex, which sounded like a place where corporations went to cheat on their taxes. The air down here smelled like concrete, exhaust, and faintly of rain. The walls were white, too clean, and a sleek elevator waited with its doors already open. Next to it stood an alpha who looked like he could pick me up with one hand and toss me back into the car if I tried anything. He was huge. Broad shoulders, thick forearms, buzz-cut hair, dark skin, a neck thicker than my thigh. The bulletproof vest under his black uniform didn't help the impression. He had that stillness some alphas had, like if they moved, it would be for a reason, and that reason would not be good news for whoever caused it. Hi, I said. Nice bunker. His mouth twitched. Just barely. Elevator's ready, sir. Sir, that was new. Inside, Asher stood already, one hand in his pocket, the other casually resting on the rail. Not a speck of dust on his suit despite the explosion earlier that day in his office. I wondered if his dry cleaning bill was its own line item in the city budget. Jay, he said. This is Captain Hayes. Most people call him Cap. Because of the rank, I guessed, stepping into the elevator. The doors closed with a hush behind me. Not the personality. A pause. Then, behind me, the big alpha actually huffed a short, surprised laugh. I like him, he said to Asher. Don't encourage him, Asher replied. The elevator hummed into motion, shooting us upward so smoothly my stomach only realized we were moving because my ears popped. No floor numbers lit up, just a simple progress bar sliding toward the top. This building isn't on the public registry, right? I asked, watching our reflections in the mirrored walls. I looked smaller between them than I felt. Lean, angular, my dark hair falling messily into my eyes, the black collar a stark line at my throat. As far as anyone outside my security team is concerned, Asher said, I live in a modest apartment, Near City Hall and sleep at my desk 3 nights a week like a devoted public servant. A lie, I said. Tragic. I do sleep at my desk, he noted. Sometimes. The elevator glided to a stop. The doors opened to a hallway made of glass and air. For a second, all I could do was stare. We'd arrived on what looked like a suspended walkway. Thick glass underfoot, glass walls to either side, and the city's night spread out in a glittering dome around us. The walkway connected the elevator shaft to the actual penthouse, an angular structure of steel and tinted windows that looked like it had grown out of the rooftop. Above us, the sky was a smear of deep blue and purple, clouds cut by the hazed glow of billboards and drones. Night wind slid along the glass with a soft, constant sigh. "Welcome home," Asher said. "Yeah," I muttered. Very subtle. Totally normal level of rich. We crossed the bridge. Inside the main doors, the temperature shifted. Perfectly climate-controlled. Air filtered, faint smell of citrus and something sterile. The foyer was larger than my entire building's lobby. Marble floor. Minimalist furniture in shades of white, gray and black. Lines so clean they almost hurt to look at. It was beautiful. It felt like a high-end clinic. A woman waited there, tablet in hand, heels planted, back straight. She had short, sharp dark hair, a precise red mouth, and eyes like a hawk's. Beta. If my nose could be trusted under all the air purifiers. "Mayor Crowe," she said. Her gaze flicked to me. Her jaw tightened a fraction of a millimeter. "And guessed." "Omega," I supplied. "The word you're looking for is Omega." "Jay," Asher said, ignoring my commentary. "This is my chief of staff, Lena Cho. She runs my schedule and half the city. Try not to break her." "I don't break that easily," she said. Her tone didn't bother with sugar. "Then to me you'll address him as Mayor Crowe in public and sir to staff. There are expectations for your role here, and it's essential we go over them immediately." She extended a folder. A literal folder. Cream cardstock, embossed with the same sigil as my collar. On the front, in calm black letters, Omega Conduct Guidelines, Mayoral Residence. I almost laughed. "Oh, this is going to be good," I said, taking it. "Can I frame it?" "If that helps you remember it," Lena said thinly. "Page 1. I flipped it open before she could start reading aloud, because if I was going to be handed a manual on how to behave like a proper pet, I refused to be passive about it. "Omegas must maintain an appearance appropriate to the mayoral office at all times," I read. "So, no old band t-shirts with sarcasm on them, tragic loss to fashion." Lena's eyes narrowed. "Your wardrobe will be updated to meet standards. Omegas will avoid political commentary during public appearances," I continued. "You might want to get a thicker folder. This one's already obsolete." "I'm serious, Mr. Reyes." "So am I," said lightly. Page 3. "Oh, this one's great. Omegas must not engage with media without prior approval." You do realize you basically collared a journalist, right? That's like buying a race car, and then banning it from going over 30. Cap, standing by the door like a statue, coughed into his fist. It sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Lena shot him a look that could have bent metal. "Enough for now," Asher said mildly. "Lena, give us the abridged version later. I'd like to show Jay his room." Her lips pressed together. "Yes, sir," she said. Then to me, with the kind of smile you give a cat you fully intend to spray with water any minute now, "We'll revisit this." "I can't wait," I said. We went deeper into the penthouse. It was big. That was an understatement, but my brain refused to produce better words. High ceilings, open spaces, art that probably cost more than my yearly medical insurance premiums, if I'd had them. Glass walls with adjustable opacity, plants that were either real and pampered or fake and very expensive. Somewhere in the back, I glimpsed a glass door leading out onto a rooftop terrace, with low seating and a view that would make influencers sell their souls. And the whole time, the silence was loud. Everything was too neat. Too curated. Nothing out of place, nothing showing any trace of actual human mess. No jacket flung on the back of a chair, no mug left half-finished on a table. It was like walking through a very tastefully designed show set. "Do you ever actually live here?" I asked, "or do you just recharge in a broom closet between press conferences?" "Most of my life happens in City Hall," he said. "This place is for sleeping. Occasionally." "Must be nice," I said. "Having a bed wider than my entire apartment. We'll make sure your new space is comfortable." There it was. Your new space. We reached a hallway off the main living area. Security terminals blinked unobtrusively at intersections. I counted cameras without meaning to. 2 in the foyer. 1 watching the glass bridge. 1 above the large open kitchen. Motion sensors near the terrace door. We stopped in front of a door with a discreet panel next to it. "This is yours," Asher said. The door slid open soundlessly. I stepped inside, and had to fight not to whistle. The room was huge. Bigger than the loft I'd been renting with 3 other people and a family of roaches. There was a bed with a padded headboard, a couch, a small dining nook by the window, a built-in desk, and more storage space than I'd ever owned things to put in. The window itself took up almost an entire wall, looking out over the city's spine of towers and light. Everything was done in calming colors. Soft grays, muted creams, warm wood, hotel luxurious, hotel impersonal, no photographs, no personal items, no clutter. A faint hum came from the ceiling, where the air system breathed in and out. The lighting adjusted as I walked in, tracking me. My gaze flicked to the corners. There, a tiny black dot, camera. Above the door, another sensor. The panel by the entrance likely controlled access, energy, maybe even the opacity of the window. My neck prickled. 2 doors waited on the far wall. One was obviously a bathroom. Steam-proof glass, hint of tile. The other... "That leads to the shared corridor," Asher said, following my line of sight. "And beyond it, to my private rooms." "Of course it does," I said. "Wouldn't want your Omega too far out of reach." "Safety," he said. "Sure," I said. "Let's go with that." He watched me as I wandered the room, opening the closet, empty for now. Checking the drawers, also empty, testing the mattress with a hand. Soft. Too soft. The kind of bed you sank into if you let yourself. "Every Omega in this city would kill for a room like this," Lena's voice said from the doorway. I hadn't heard her follow us. Betas move quiet when they wanted. "Good to know I'm trending," I said. "Do I get a matching hashtag?" "You get security," she snapped. "Protection, privacy, medical access, food that isn't instant noodles. And the privilege of the mayor's patronage. Don't forget the cameras," I said. "Those are my favorite part." Asher's jaw flexed once. "Cameras are in common areas and doorways," he said. "Not in the bathroom. Not over the bed." "How generous," I said. "The illusion of privacy. Very modern." His eyes met mine, steady. "You want honesty, Jay?" he asked. "You are a high-risk Omega, with a history of inciting protests. You're under my protection and my roof. That means if someone tries to use you against me, I need to know before they get that far. The security isn't just for me." I hated that a small grudging part of me understood that. "Fine," I said shortly. "What's the food situation in this gilded cage? Do I at least get to choose my own poison?" "As it happens," he said, "dinner is ready." He led me to a dining area that overlooked the city like a throne balcony. The table was long enough to seat 12. Tonight there were only 2 places set, one at the head, one to the right of it. I noticed. I also noticed he gestured me toward the chair on the right. I went to the one on the left instead. His eyebrows flicked up. The tiniest movement. He didn't correct me, just took the other seat. Subtle tension collected in Lena's shoulders where she stood near the sideboard, watching like an anxious hawk. Cap took up station near the door, hands clasped behind his back. Dinner was ridiculous. Perfectly grilled fish, vegetables that looked like they'd been on a magazine cover, a sauce I couldn't name but wanted to drink from the bowl. My stomach growled loudly enough to be rude. I picked up my fork like it might explode. "So," I said, because the silence was worse than my voice, "do we do a toast? To coercive arrangements and light sedition?" "If you like," Asher said, "but I'd rather we discuss expectations." "Of course you would," I muttered. He set his utensils down neatly. "From tomorrow," he said, "you'll accompany me to selected public appearances. Nothing overly formal at first. Charity events, clinic visits, things that establish your presence without overstating it. So you can show the city your new Omega and how very stable and family-friendly you are," I said. "Got it." "You'll also be briefed on household protocols," Lena added. "Staff access, acceptable visitors, media restrictions." "No media," Asher cut in. His gaze slid back to me. "You will not write, publish, or leak anything under your name, your pseudonym, or anyone else's. Not until I say otherwise." I felt my fork pause halfway to my mouth. "No writing?" I repeated. No agitation, he said. No calls to protest. No anonymous exposés fueled by half-facts and righteous fury. You wanted to keep your freedom? This is the compromise. You breathe. They don't burn the city down using your words as kindling. I put the fork down carefully. And my friends? I asked. Contacts? I'm assuming you want me to drop off the grid with them too. Your previous associates will be monitored, he said. For their safety and mine. You will not contact them directly without clearance. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. So basically, you're amputating my entire life, I said. Good to know we're setting realistic expectations. This is about preventing further harm, he said quietly. You may not like what the system does, Jay, but you can't deny the impact your work has had, both good and bad. Anger flared hot under my skin. Don't you dare use my words to guilt-trip me, I snapped. I wrote what was happening. If the truth made people angry, maybe the problem isn't the messenger. His gaze didn't waver. I'm not asking you to like it, he said. I'm asking you to understand the stakes. Oh, I understand them, I said. I also understand I'm now sitting across from the man who holds the leash. Congratulations. You win? For a moment something flashed in his eyes. Irritation maybe, or something sharper. Then it smoothed out again, replaced by that same calm, controlled expression. You can hate me as much as you like, he said, his tone almost gentle. But while that collar is on your neck, you're mine. The collar seemed to pulse against my skin, hot and cold at once. I held his gaze, 1,000 retorts crashing around in my skull. Out loud I said nothing. Inside, I thought, fine. For now. Because sure, the system had just tagged me as the mayor's Omega. His property. His responsibility. But nowhere in any of those shiny guidelines did it say a patron couldn't be used. If Asher Crowe thought owning me would make me harmless, he'd misjudged his investment. He might be my jailer. He was also, whether he realized it yet or not, the best source I'd ever had. If there's one thing I've learned since moving into the mayor's glass palace, it's that rich people love ribbon cuttings. They'll build a facility that should have existed 10 years ago, slap some inspirational quote on the wall, then throw a party about how generous they are for finally doing the bare minimum. Today's bare minimum was a brand new Omega Health Clinic, all white walls and soft lighting. And calming design principles that probably cost more than my old neighborhood. This is good work, Asher had said in the car on the way over, like he could hear my thoughts. No matter what you think of the politics. I hadn't argued. Out loud. The clinic loomed in front of us now, gleaming under an overcast sky. Hollow banners floated above the entrance, safe, modern, inclusive. A cluster of reporters waited behind a thin barricade, cameras already pointed, mics extended. The air smelled like rain and fresh concrete. Remember, Lena murmured as she adjusted the line of my jacket. No commentary. I thought that's why you brought me, I said. To stand here and look pretty while you make policy, sound like a bedtime story. That too, she said, and stepped back. They'd dressed me for the occasion, dark blue suit, white shirt open at the throat, the black collar a stark line against my skin. A small pin with the mayoral sigil glinted on my lapel. I had to admit, they had good taste. I looked less like a stray someone had dragged in and more like an accessory. Expensive. Curated. The thought made my skin itch. Asher, a reporter called as we approached the podium. How does it feel? To be opening the first Omega-specific clinic in the southern districts? Like we're one step closer to the city we should already be, he said smoothly. Applause. Flashing lights. The man could make a garbage fire sound noble. I took my place slightly behind and to his right, where Lena had indicated earlier. Visible. Supportive. Silent. That was, apparently, the plan. The front row was a mix of donors, council members, and carefully selected community representatives. A few Omegas, dressed in their best, watched me with open curiosity. I could feel the weight of their eyes on the collar around my neck. I lifted my chin a fraction. If I was going to be a symbol, I'd be one on my own terms. Asher began his speech. I'd heard him talk a lot in the last week. On screens, in person, rehearsing in the car. He was good. Too good. His voice rolled over the crowd like warm water, full of empathy and careful pauses. No Omega should have to choose between their health and their safety, he was saying now. This clinic is structured to ensure that protected status is a right, not a luxury. Here, no one will be turned away for lack of a patron. That got another round of applause. I watched the faces. The hopeful ones. The skeptical ones. the ones that had clearly been burned before. I'd written about clinics like this. The ones that looked great at openings and then quietly under-delivered once the cameras turned away. Is this one different? I wondered. He kept going, outlining the services, counseling, hormone regulation, heat management, legal support for abuse cases. On paper, it sounded good, better than anything we'd had growing up. And none of this would be possible, he said, queuing up the gratitude section, without the cooperation of our counsel, our medical partners, and the voices who've spoken up, sometimes loudly, about the gaps in our system. His eyes slid sideways for the briefest moment. To me, I kept my face neutral. When he finished, the crowd clapped obediently. The oversized scissors were produced. A ribbon was cut, cameras flashed, holodrones captured it from 10 different angles for tomorrow's feeds. Then came my least favorite part, the press line. We moved down the row like an event package: Mayor, Omega, Chief of Staff, Security. A few reporters shouted questions about funding, staffing, long-term sustainability. Asher answered each one with practiced ease, never missing a beat. Then a woman in a green blazer lifted her mic and aimed it directly at me. "Jay Reyes," she called, loud enough to be heard over the ambient noise. "How does it feel to be the mayor's Omega, and see projects like this funded and prioritized?" Lena visibly tensed beside me. I felt her inhale. Asher turned slightly, opening the angle so I was clearly in the shot. His expression was pleasant but cautious. "You don't have to answer that," he said under his breath. Which, of course, made me want to answer it more. I gave the reporter my best camera-ready smile. "Well," I said, "it feels overdue." A ripple went through the crowd. A few heads turned. I kept going. "I mean, it's great," I added quickly, letting just enough sincerity in to keep this from being an outright grenade. "Honestly, this clinic is something Omegas have needed for a long time. Private patronage can't be the only way to get decent healthcare. So yeah, I'm glad the mayor is finally putting resources where his campaign slogans are." Next to me, Asher's shoulders went just the tiniest bit stiff. The reporter seemed delighted. "So, you'd say you're holding him accountable from the inside?" "I'd say he's very lucky I'm here to keep things interesting," I said. There was laughter. Genuine. Surprised. Another mic thrust forward. "Jay, as someone who's criticized the administration in the past, do you?" Lena stepped in. "We'll take questions about policy, not personal life," she said crisply. "Oh, but personal and political are very intertwined," I said sweetly. "Right, Mayor?" He cut me a look from the side. It should have iced my bones. Instead, it just made adrenaline fizz in my veins. "We welcome constructive input," he said to the reporter, tone even. "Jay is very passionate about making sure we don't forget who we serve." "Translation," I said, bright enough for the nearest cameras to pick up. "I nag him until he actually does the good ideas instead of just filing them in a pretty folder." This time the laughter was louder. A couple of younger Omegas in the back whooped. I saw it happen like a wave, phones up, clips already being recorded, streamed, shared. In a few hours there would be captions. "The mayor's Omega calls him out. Is Jay Reyes the real power behind Crowe?" Somewhere deep in Lena's soul, a blood vessel popped. "Jay," she hissed under her breath. "Remember the guidelines." "I am," I murmured back. "I'm being very polite. I didn't swear even once." We finished the line without further incidents, mostly because Asher started talking faster and giving the reporters fewer openings. The clinic tour that followed was guided, controlled, full of handshakes and photo ops. Still, every time we passed a reflective surface, a window, a polished panel, even the glass of a display case, I caught glimpses of myself at his side. The collar, the suit, the easy sharp smile. I looked like I belonged there. That thought was more unnerving than anything else. By the time we slid into the back of the limo, the sky had darkened into a heavy violet, city lights bleeding into it from below. The door thumped shut, sealing us into leather and quiet and the faint thrum of the engine. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it. A notification from one of the public feeds, algorithmically blessed into my recommendations. A short clip, me and Asher, on the press line. My face animated, my mouth forming the words, "Very lucky I'm here to keep things interesting." The caption, "The mayor's Omega has zero chill and we love IT." I huffed a laugh despite myself. "Already?" I said. "Wow. The internet moves fast." "Jay," Asher's voice was low. I looked up. He was closer than I'd realized. The car wasn't that big, but suddenly it felt smaller. His suit jacket brushed my sleeve, his thigh a warm line along mine, his scent wrapping around me in the enclosed space, clean, sharp, with that deeper note that tugged at instincts I didn't want to name. His expression was neutral. His eyes were not. "Were you trying to undermine me out there?" he asked softly, "or was that just an unfortunate side effect of your mouth?" "Why not both?" I said. "Besides, you said you wanted me there as a symbol. I symbolized—" "You turned a clinic opening into a comedy segment." "Yes," I said. "And people are actually watching it now." "You're welcome." The muscle in his jaw ticked once. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said quietly. "So are you," I said, just as quiet. "You put a collar on someone whose job is literally to tell inconvenient truths. What did you think was going to happen? I'd suddenly develop a filter?" His shoulder bumped mine as the car took a turn. He didn't move away. If anything, he leaned in a fraction more, as if crowding me on that side was a reflex. "You could have supported the message without undercutting me," he said. "I didn't undercut you," I said. "I sharpened you. People love it when power gets poked. Makes you look less like a statue and more like a person. Jay. Mayor." His lips pressed together. "You've been under my roof for 1 week," he said. "And I'm already wondering if I should have sent you straight to isolation instead." My chest flinched around the word, even though I knew he didn't mean it. "Not entirely." "You won't," I said. His gaze slid down, lingering for a breath on the collar at my throat, then back up. "No," he said. "I won't." The car hit a stretch of smooth road. The lights from outside striped across his face, white, then blue, then red from a passing advert. His eyes looked darker in the shifting glow. "You're insane," he said after a moment, more to himself than to me. "Do you know that?" "Frequently told," I said. "Rarely wrong." He huffed something that almost sounded like a laugh, then caught himself, frown returning. "You're my omega," he said. "You represent me when you speak in public." "I represent myself," I corrected. "The fact that I'm standing next to you doesn't make me a ventriloquist dummy." His hand moved then, almost without warning. Not fast, not rough, just very deliberate. He reached out and laid his palm lightly against my lower back, fingers spread, warmth bleeding through the fabric of my jacket and shirt. The pressure was barely there, enough to let me know he could have pulled me closer if he wanted to. It jolted straight through me, the contact. My skin lit up under his hand, a spark that ran along my spine and sat there, buzzing. My instincts did that traitorous flare, heat coiling low in a way that had nothing to do with anger. I forced my body not to flinch, not away, not toward, just still. He was watching me, of course. Close enough for me to see the faint gold ring around his pupils. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't try to test how far you can push this." "What am I testing?" he asked. "You're standing too close. You're touching too long. You're looking like you're weighing things you have no right to weigh." I tilted my head, met his gaze head on. "Don't try to dominate where your power is only on paper." Something sharpened behind his eyes. "You're wearing my collar," he reminded me. "And yet," I said, "I'm still not lying at your feet." Wild, isn't it? For a heartbeat, I thought I'd pushed too far. That the air would crack, that his hand would tighten, that alpha heat and temper would fill the space until I had to climb the ceiling to escape it. Instead, he let out a breath that was almost a growl and pulled his hand back, fingers curling briefly as if he had to force them to release me. "You make me angry," he said. The simplicity of it landed harder than any elaborate argument. "Good," I said, leaning back into my own corner of the seat, putting a sliver of space between us again. My pulse was still hammering, but my voice came out steady. "That means I'm doing something right." I wasn't asleep when he came. The penthouse was quiet at night, too quiet, the kind of engineered silence you could feel pressing against your eardrums. I'd been lying on my side, staring at the dim city lights through the tinted window, trying not to think about how the collar warmed subtly with my body heat. When the door slid open, it didn't make a sound, but I felt him anyway. I turned my head just enough to see the outline of a tall figure standing in the doorway, one hand braced lightly against the frame. The hallway light behind him cast him in half shadow, sharp lines and dim gold, like a painting someone forgot to finish. Asher didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence stretched between us, taut as a tripwire. Finally he stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing us into dimness. I pushed myself up slowly, sheets rustling, heart kicking up in a pace that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with unwanted biology. He didn't come any closer. He just stood there at the foot of my bed, gaze settling on me with a weight I could physically feel. "You shouldn't be here," I said quietly. "That's debatable," he replied, voice low, almost casual. "You live under my roof, we're an official pair now. People expect us to share more than a press line." My throat tightened. I hated that it did. "So what?" I asked. "You're here to test drive the merchandise?" His jaw flexed, just once. "Is that what you think this is?" "It's what the city thinks," I said. "An omega, with a collar, and a patron. People assume things. I'm not people." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "You're worse. You're the one person whose opinion actually affects my life now." That pinned him for a second. Then he exhaled. Not angry, not impatient, just steady. He took 2 slow steps toward me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell him. Clean skin and something deep and warm, a subtle alpha musk that tightened low in my stomach like someone had hooked a nail there. "Tell me honestly," he said. "Why are you fighting this so hard?" "You know why? I want to hear it from you." I shook my head. "No. Jay." The way he said my name, soft, almost coaxing, should have been illegal. I dragged a hand down my face. "Because," I said finally, "I'm not a thing." His gaze sharpened. "I never called you one. You don't have to. A collar says it for you." He moved a little closer then, slowly, giving me every chance to retreat. I didn't. Maybe I couldn't. His shadow fell over me, warm in the dimness. "I won't break you," he said, voice stripped of its usual political polish. "I don't want something obedient." "Really?" I asked. "Then what do you want?" "You," he said simply. "But not like this. Not because you're trapped. Not because you think you owe me anything." His eyes dipped to the collar on my throat, then back up, something unguarded flickering in the look. "I want you to come to me on your own." The words hit deeper than they should have. Something in my chest tilted, off balance, sharp, unwelcome. I swallowed hard. "That's never going to happen." His voice was nearly a whisper. "Is it?" I hated him for asking that. I hated myself more for not answering immediately. Because my body was betraying me. Hard. His scent wrapped around me like heat, like the slow pull of something ancient in my blood. My pulse sped up, my palms got damp. My skin prickled as his alpha presence stirred instincts I'd spent years burying. This was wrong. Dangerous. Stupid. It was also real. Too real. Something inside me responded to him in a way I had no business feeling. A buzzing beneath my skin, a heat coiling low in my stomach, a faint ache at the base of my spine like my body knew something it shouldn't. More than omega instinct. More than attraction. Something else. He saw it. Of course he saw it. His voice dropped. "You're reacting because you're standing too close," I snapped, even though he wasn't close enough at all. "Because I'm an omega, not a robot. Because I'm what?" I clenched my teeth. "Because you're an alpha, and you smell like one. That's not all of it." His tone softened. "Damn him. Something else is happening with you." I went rigid. He didn't press. But he didn't back up either. The air between us was thick with everything neither of us was saying. Like the fact that if he touched me now, really touched me, I didn't know what I would do. Punch him? Kiss him? Break down? Give in? All equally possible. All equally terrifying. "Get out," I said finally, my voice raw. He didn't move. So I forced out the word again, steady this time. "Get out." A long moment passed. Then he stepped back. One slow step. Then another. His expression unreadable, but his gaze never leaving mine. At the door he paused. "I meant what I said, Jay. I won't take what isn't given." "Good," I said, even though my chest felt too tight. "Because I'm not giving anything." His eyes dropped to the faint pulse at my throat. "For now," he murmured. And then he was gone. The door slid shut with that same whisper-soft sound, leaving behind only the faint echo of his scent, a warm, lingering trace that wound through my nerves like a live wire. I dragged both hands through my hair and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling like it could give me answers. My heartbeat wouldn't slow. My skin still buzzed where his presence had pressed against it. My thoughts were a mess of fear and heat, and something even uglier, want. Not for the collar. Not for the protection. For him. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. My mistake wasn't putting the collar on. My mistake was this, maybe. I want him to be the one who takes it off. City Hall always felt different in daylight. At night, from Asher's office, the city was something distant and glittering, a toy he moved with policy and press conferences. In the middle of the day, on the ground floor, it was loud and messy and very, very real. The main atrium buzzed with people. Citizens queued for permits, complaints, and promises. Security checkpoints hummed. Holographic displays scrolled announcements in 3 languages. The air smelled like coffee, recycled air, and too many bodies wearing too many different scents. We were halfway through a public hearing day, the kind of thing Asher called essential transparency and I used to call performative theater in my articles. It was harder to be smug about that when I'd spent the last 3 hours watching him work. He sat at the center of the long curved table in the council chamber, flanked by members of the Alpha-dominated city council. The room rose around us in tiers, filled with citizens, reporters, aides. I had a seat slightly behind him, visible but off to the side, a reminder, yes, the mayor has an Omega, and yes, he brings him to work like a very controversial briefcase. A woman from one of the lower districts was speaking now, voice cracking as she described being turned away from a private clinic because her patron had revoked his support. An Omega in her mid-30s, with tired eyes and a white-knuckled grip on her folder. We couldn't afford the heat blockers without his coverage, she said. The public clinic had a 3-week wait. 3 weeks. Do you know what that's like for someone like me, with kids at home and no one to watch them? I begged. They said if I wanted priority, I should find a new alpha. Her voice broke on the last word. In my old articles, this would have been the part where I inserted a scorching paragraph about systemic cruelty and the commodification of Omega bodies. I still believed all of that. What I hadn't written, couldn't because I hadn't known, was how Asher reacted in rooms like this. We failed you, he said quietly. He didn't dress it up. No deflection, no if, just flat acknowledgement. The woman blinked, thrown. We're opening an additional public clinic in your district within the month, he continued. But that doesn't help you now, Captain Hayes. He nodded toward where Cap stood at the wall like an armored tree. We'll assign a liaison to your case today. You will have an appointment by tomorrow morning, and the city will cover any medication costs until your situation is stable. The woman sagged a little, as if someone had cut strings she'd been holding too tight. Thank you, she whispered. This shouldn't be a favor, Asher said. More for the room than for her. It should have been standard. We're changing that. He said it calmly, but I'd been watching him long enough to notice the way his fingers tightened briefly on the edge of the table. Anger, contained and redirected. 2 council members, both alphas who loved saying words like responsibility when they meant control, shifted in their seats, clearly unhappy with how far he was going. One of them cleared his throat. Mayor Crowe, we can't promise individual interventions every time someone. We can, Asher said pleasantly. When the system we built has put them in that position. I stared at him. This wasn't the monster I'd written about. This wasn't the power-glutted tyrant I'd painted in sharp righteous strokes as Greytail. This was a man, flawed, political, maybe too careful. But trying. From behind his calm face I could feel the calculations, how far he could push the council without losing a crucial vote later. How much he could promise without overextending already fragile budgets. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pure. It was messy, and compromised, and real. It messed with my head. Before I could spiral too hard, the hearing adjourned for a short break. People stood, murmuring. Some headed for the exits, others for the coffee. Asher turned away from the table, shoulders easing a millimeter as Lena appeared at his elbow with a tablet and a whisper. 5-minute recess, she said. Then the zoning dispute. Of course, he said, skimming something on the screen. Has the council finance chair seen the revised numbers for Mayor? Cap's voice cut in from near the side door. It was low, but I heard the shift in it. Not panic. Alert. We've got a. The world blew sideways. The first explosion wasn't loud at first, not to my ears. It was more a pressure, a sudden fist of air slamming into the building, shoving the breath out of my lungs. The floor jumped. Light fixtures rattled. For half a second there was silence as everyone processed that something had gone very, very wrong. Then the windows shattered. Glass screamed as it broke, a high, tearing sound. Shards rained inward in a glittering wave. People screamed with it. The overhead hollows flickered, warping, then cut out completely. Smoke rolled in from somewhere above, acrid and burning the back of my throat. Down! Cap's voice roared. Everybody down? Chairs scraped. Bodies hit the floor. Lena grabbed Asher's arm, tugging him toward the dais steps. An alarm began to wail, shrill and insistent, echoing off stone and metal. I didn't remember deciding to move. One moment I was sitting behind the mayor, the next my body had already launched, instinct taking the wheel. The world blurred around the edges, sounds stretching and sharpening at the same time. Every pulse in the room was a drum, every breath a downbeat. I was on my feet, then over the low barrier, then in front of Asher before my conscious mind caught up. "Jay," he started. I grabbed him and shoved him down, covering him with my body as a second blast ripped through the upper balcony. This one I heard properly. It punched my ears, turned the alarm into a momentary squeal drowned under a roar. Heat licked the side of my face, the shockwave pressing hard between my shoulder blades. Something heavy crashed where his head had been a second before. A chunk of plaster, a broken beam. It splintered against my back and shoulders and slid off like it weighed nothing. Dust and smoke swallowed the room. He was beneath me, one arm instinctively around my waist, the other braced, muscles tense. His heart hammered against my chest, strong and fast. My own pulse matched it, but not from fear. From something else. "Are you?" he started. "Fine," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Stay down." People were sobbing. Someone was shouting for help. Somewhere, a child wailed. The thick, choking smell of burned wiring and explosives cut through the air. "Cap?" Asher shouted, twisting to look toward where the security captain had been. "I've got the west side." Cap's voice came through the haze. "Evacuating. We got secondaries?" As if in answer, a shape moved through the smoke at the side entrance. Not security. Wrong stance, wrong clothes. Hood up. Mask on. Gun in hand. He didn't hesitate. He saw Asher, still half covered by my body. Raised the weapon. Aimed. Time slowed to a crawl. I felt my vision narrow, edges going sharp and color saturated. The man's heart thudded in my awareness, fast and erratic, flooded with adrenaline. I could see the tiny tremor in his trigger finger. His scent hit me under the reek of smoke, fear, fanatic resolve, bitter chemical residue from whatever he'd used to make the bombs. He was 6 meters away. Too far for anyone normal to reach in time. Good thing I was not normal. I moved. The floor seemed to drop away under my feet. I crossed the distance between us in a breath, the world smearing past in streaks of gray and red. The man's eyes went wide behind his mask. All pupil. He tried to adjust his aim, but to him, I must have looked like I'd just jumped frames in a bad video. I hit him center mass. We crashed into the wall, the impact thudding through my bones. But it barely registered. The gun clattered away, spinning across the floor. He tried to grab it, to elbow me, to do anything. And then his gaze met mine directly. Something in me uncoiled. I felt my lips peel back from my teeth in a snarl that didn't feel entirely human. My gums ached, then tingled, then my fangs dropped. Not the small, rounded canines of your average Omega. I'd seen those in mirrors, filed them down once as a kid, trying to look less like what I was. These were different, longer, sharper. The air tasted metallic and hot on them. The world went even sharper around the edges. Every sound and scent slamming into my senses. The man froze. "What the?" he gasped, voice shaking. I didn't bite him. I wanted to. A wild, deep part of me screamed for it. For the satisfying tear of flesh, the copper, tang of blood. The primal joy of sinking my teeth into a threat and ending it. Instead, I let my hands do the work. I grabbed his wrist, twisted the way Cap had shown me once in a self-defense demo, and forced him to the floor. With a sickening wrench of ligaments that made him drop whatever backup weapon he'd been reaching for. My knee hit his chest, pinning him. My hand clamped around his throat. Not crushing, but firm. "Don't," I snarled. He didn't. He couldn't. His whole body shook under mine, his pupils blown wide with terror. I became aware, distantly, that the room had gone quieter. Not silent, but focused. People were still crying, still coughing. But nearer me, there was a ring of space where no one moved. Behind me, I heard footsteps crunching on broken glass. "Stand down," Cap barked from somewhere to my right, but his voice held a note of stunned caution I'd never heard before. I didn't move. Slowly, I turned my head. Asher was on his feet now, dust streaking his dark hair, jacket askew, blood trickling from a shallow cut at his temple. Lena hovered near him, eyes wide, tablet forgotten somewhere behind her. Security staff formed a loose half-circle, guns trained not just on the attacker but, almost, on me. Asher stepped forward. "Lower your weapons," he said. "Sir." One of the guards started. "Now." They obeyed. Reluctantly. The attacker wheezed beneath my hand, trying to speak. I released his throat and shoved myself backward, suddenly aware of every inch of my own skin. My heart was racing. My breathing too. My teeth still felt wrong in my mouth. Heavy. Sharp. I swiped my tongue over them, and tasted the unfamiliar shape of the fangs. Panic flickered cold in my gut. No, not here. Not like this. I raised a hand to my mouth, covering it, trying to will everything back to normal. Nothing about me felt normal. "If you're going to arrest him," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I liked, "do it before he figures out how to blow anything else up." Asher stopped just out of arm's reach. Up close, I could see every detail of his face, dust in his lashes, a bruise, starting along his jaw, that thin cut still bleeding sluggishly. His chest rose and fell a little too fast. His scent was a confusing storm, anger, adrenaline, protective fury, and underneath it all, something like awe. He looked at the disarmed attacker on the floor, then at me. At my hand, still half covering my mouth. At the way I was holding myself too still. "Jay," he said quietly. "Move your hand." I stared at him. "No. Please." The please hit harder than the order might have. Slowly, fingers stiff, I let my hand drop. His eyes flicked to my mouth. I saw the exact moment he registered what he was seeing, the way his pupils expanded. The tiny intake of breath. The calculation, the realization, the curiosity. He didn't recoil. He didn't bark orders, didn't call for restraints, didn't label me a threat. He just looked at me like the entire shape of the world had changed. "Who," he said softly, "are you, Jay?" They put us on different floors, but no one said it out loud like that. Officially, I was under medical observation in a secure wing. Unofficially, I was in a very nice, very monitored cage. The room had all the hallmarks of the high-tier hospital suites I'd only ever seen on screens: adjustable bed, wall-sized display muted on, some news channel, a private bathroom, flowers on the side table that were probably from donors rather than anyone who actually knew me, and cameras, tucked neatly into the corners, red lights winking like tiny unblinking eyes. I sat on the bed in a t-shirt and hospital pants, bare feet dangling, and 4-port taped to the back of my hand even though I wasn't actually hooked up to anything. 2 security officers stood outside the sliding glass door, silhouettes visible through the frosted panel. Every so often I'd catch one of them glancing in. They'd look away quickly, like I might read their thoughts through the glass. "Relax," I muttered at the ceiling. If I were going to go feral, I'd have done it already. My reflection in the black screen above the bed didn't argue. The fangs had receded after the chaos. At some point between the attacker being dragged away and the medics swarming the room, my teeth had normalized. Still a little too sharp, but not the obvious knives they'd been a minute before. Nobody had talked about that either. Not yet. A soft chime sounded. The door unlocked with a gentle hiss. I straightened automatically, shoulders tensing. The glass panel slid aside. It wasn't a doctor. It was Asher. He looked worse in hospital light than he had in the smoke. The cut on his temple was neatly closed with medical gel strips, but the bruise beneath it had darkened to an ugly wash of purple-yellow. There was a sling around his left arm now, immobilizing a shoulder that had apparently done something unfortunate when the ceiling tried to drop on us. The rest of him was still infuriatingly composed in soft gray lounge clothes, of course. Behind him, Cap hovered like a wall with a heartbeat. 5 minutes, Cap said. "Door stays open. No one else goes in." "I'm not going to eat him," I said. "Not helping, Reyes." Cap sighed. Asher gave him a small nod. Cap stepped back out, letting the door whisper mostly closed. It stayed a sliver open, just enough for him to react if I decided to throw the bed at the mayor or something. I wouldn't. But I understood why they were nervous. Asher took a step into the room. Then another. Each one measured. Up close, I could see the fine dust still clinging stubbornly in the folds of his hair, the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. Those eyes now were fixed on me with a look I'd never seen before. Not political. Not controlled. Something raw. Sharper. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I blinked. "Is that a medical question or a PR one?" "Both," he said. "Peachy," I said. "A couple bruises, no shrapnel, no concussions. The doctors keep looking at my scans like they're an unsolved puzzle, which is super comforting." His gaze flicked briefly over me, like he was cataloging visible injuries. Finding none, he relaxed, minutely. "Good," he said. "I told them not to treat you like an experiment." "That's generous," I said lightly, though my stomach nodded. Given the circumstances. Silence stretched between us, heavier than the quiet had any right to be. He moved to the chair beside the bed, and lowered himself into it with careful precision, wincing as his shoulders shifted. For a moment, we just sat there, the hum of the building and the distant beeping of monitors down the hall filling the space between us. Then he said very softly, "Who are you, Jay?" I stared at my hands. The skin over my knuckles was scraped but already half-healed. Faster than it should have been. The faint soreness in my body was fading more quickly than made sense, even for an Omega with heightened healing. I'd spent years hiding this. Years pretending I was just another slightly too aware, slightly too quick, mouthy Omega with bad impulse control and a taste for trouble. Years lying about what I saw in the mirror when my teeth glinted wrong in the light. I'd never meant for him to see. "You already know who I am," I said, buying time. "Jay Reyes, Grey Tail, Omega pain in your ass, local menace." "I know those names," he said. "They don't explain what you did today, or what I saw in your mouth." I flinched. "I'm not—" I started, then stopped. I'd promised myself. If it ever came down to it, if someone with real power found out, either I'd lie until I couldn't anymore, or I'd go all in and let them decide. "Whatever you think I am," I said slowly, "I'm not some failed lab project. I wasn't engineered in a basement. I'm not contagious. You can relax your biohazard protocols." His brows drew together faintly. "I'm not worried about contamination." "Then what are you worried about?" I snapped. "That I'm a monster you didn't account for in your spreadsheets?" "I'm worried," he said evenly, "that you're sitting there acting like I haven't been trying to keep you out of cages since the day we met." That knocked the next sarcastic line right out of my throat. He watched me for a long moment. "Tell me the truth," he said, voice quiet but unyielding. "If not for me, then for yourself. You don't look like an Omega fresh out of some black market augmentation clinic. Whatever you are, it's older than that. Isn't it?" My pulse stumbled. "Who've you been talking to?" I asked, wary. "No one," he said. "Yet." "I'm asking you first." "Yet." That one syllable dug in like a splinter. I pulled my legs up onto the bed, crossing them, ankles tucked in, making myself smaller and hating that it felt like a retreat. I stared past him for a moment, at the watercolor landscape someone had hung on the wall, probably to make rich patients feel like they were somewhere peaceful and natural, instead of in a very expensive cage. "My family," I said finally, the words sticking in my throat, "used to joke that we were made wrong." Asher's expression didn't change, but he leaned infinitesimally forward. "We were faster than we should have been," I went on. "Stronger, sharper senses. My grandmother used to say our blood ran too hot, like the old stories. People noticed. And in a world where Omegas are already considered volatile being, anything extra is like walking around with a target on your back." I twisted the edge of the hospital blanket between my fingers. "There used to be more of us," I said. That's what my grandmother said anyway. A long time ago. Before records got neat and sanitized. Before the councils decided what was acceptable biology and what wasn't. "What happened to them?" he asked. "What do you think happened?" I laughed, short and bitter. "They called us dangerous, unstable, useful in wars maybe but frightening in peacetime. So they called us. Slowly, quietly. One law here, one medical intervention there. One convenient disappearing act at a time. By the time I was born, my family was down to stories and a few half-forgotten habits. I could still remember my grandmother's voice, rough with age and old cigarettes, telling me to never show my teeth too much, never run too fast when anyone was watching, never admit how far I could hear. "You're not an anomaly," Asher said softly. "You're a remnant. Congratulations, I said. You've got yourself a relic. Fear tightened under the flippancy. Fear, and something like shame. After my parents died, I added quietly, my aunt did everything she could to keep me off the radar. We moved a lot. New schools, new names. You're normal, she'd say. You're nothing special. Don't give anyone a reason to look twice. Did it work? He asked. I gave him a look. I ended up as an unbonded Omega journalist writing anonymous exposés about the people most invested in keeping things tidy, I said. So, no. His mouth curved just a little. You're afraid, he said softly, that now that I've seen what you can do, I'll send you somewhere dark with men in white coats and sharp instruments. I've read the same horror stories everyone else has, I said. I've written some of them. Don't pretend they're myths. I'm not, he said. I'm telling you, if I wanted you in a lab, Jay, you'd already be there. You wouldn't be in a private room with flowers and bored guards. You'd be you'd be strapped down, and you wouldn't be talking to me like this. That image made bile creep up the back of my throat. Comforting, I muttered. Honest, he countered. I'm not going to hand you over to people who see you as a subject. You're mine. The word hit differently this time. Less like ownership. More like responsibility. I looked away. That's not exactly reassuring either, I said, but softer. We sat there for a moment, the beeping in the hallway ticking out the seconds. Why do you stay in it? I asked suddenly. This system. You clearly see how twisted it is. You could have walked away, taken your money, bought an island somewhere, and let it burn. Tempting, he admitted. Some days. So, why not? I pressed. His gaze drifted briefly to the window, where slivers of the city were visible between the blinds. When he spoke again, his voice had a weight to it I hadn't heard before. Because leaving doesn't stop the machine, he said. It just means someone else runs it. Someone who doesn't hesitate to throw Omegas into isolation for convenience, not safety. Someone who cuts clinic funding instead of expanding it. Someone who looks at you and sees a weapon, not a person. You still see a weapon, I said quietly. I see both, he said. I see what you did today. I see what you've been doing with your words for years. I hate the parts of this system that make any of that necessary. But I also know, if I push too hard, too fast, if I try to rip the whole structure down at once, we don't get justice, we get a civil war, with Omegas in the middle again. He turned back to me. So, I move the pieces I can, he said. I build clinics. I write laws that limit how long someone can be held in isolation. I appoint people who actually listen. I slow walk bad proposals until they die in committee. I make it a little harder, every day, for the worst people to do their worst work. Incremental change, I said. While people bleed. Yes, he said. While people bleed, it's not enough. But it's what I can do from where I am. Guilt crept in, cold and sharp, curling under my ribs. How many of the radicals used my articles as justification? I asked, voice low. Do you know? His expression tightened. Enough, he said. They cited your words in their manifestos. Twisted them mostly. Took your anger and trimmed out the nuance. Made you a banner you never asked to be. I'd known on some level that my writing could inspire people to act. That was the point. But this was different. The memory of the bomber's eyes flashed behind my lids, wild, certain, terrified. I handed them a match, I whispered. And they tried to burn you with it. And everything around me, he said. They would have killed half that chamber if you hadn't moved. The room felt too small again. I should have known, I said. I should have moderated or... No, he cut in. You should not have lied to make the powerful comfortable. What you exposed needed to be seen. The problem is not that you told the truth. It's what desperate people did with it. I looked at him, throat tight. You should hate me, I said. For giving them the language to justify it. For being the voice behind the mask. I tried, he said, and there was a tired honesty in it that made my chest ache. When I saw you pin that man to the ground, when I realized you'd been lighting fires under my feet for years, when I had to order my own security not to treat you like the most dangerous thing in the building. His gaze held mine, steady, unwavering. I should have hated you, he said quietly. But I don't. I can't. I let out a shaky breath that wasn't quite a laugh. That, I said, is exactly the problem. By the time they called his name, the room was already full. Press, council members, community reps, donors, a handful of carefully selected Omegas from different districts. Every seat in the auditorium was taken. Standing room was packed with staffers, activists, the chronically curious. Hollow drones hummed above like fat metallic insects, streaming everything live. I watched it all from the wings. From here, I could see the stage from the side, the podium, the backdrop with the city seal, the 2 flag displays flanking it. A big screen hung behind, currently showing the words, policy announcement in the standard clean font that everyone had decided meant serious but approachable. Cap stood a little in front of me, eyes sweeping the crowd even from this angle, ears tuned to his comm. Lena was on the other side of the stage, tablet in hand, lips moving as she ran over something with a junior aide. And out there in the center of it, filling the screen for a moment as the cameras cut to him, was Asher. He looked different. Some of that was physical. The bruise on his temple was gone, leaving only the faintest shadow. The sling had vanished after a few weeks of very expensive rehab, replaced, with careful stretches and the occasional wince he thought no one noticed. He'd traded his usual black suit for a dark blue one today, tie a shade lighter, shirt crisp and immaculate. But the rest of it was something else. A weight, a clarity. The man who stepped up to the podium now was still the polished politician, still the controlled alpha. But there was an edge to him that hadn't been there before. A refusal to flinch. "Thank you for coming," he began. And the room hushed like someone had turned down the volume on the world. I slid my thumb along the edge of the paper in my hands, feeling the familiar roughness. The article wasn't long. 2 pages, printed, heavily annotated, folded and refolded until the creases had become part of it. I'd rewritten it 3 times. The first drafts had wanted to be manifestos. The final one was not that. I glanced down at the first line again. The man I once called a monster is about to change the rules that made him necessary. Not an apology. Not a praise-singing anthem. Something in between. Honest. Uncomfortable. True. On stage, Asher started laying out the reforms. "First," he said, voice amplifying through the room and over 1,000 screens at once, "we're drafting legislation that will remove the requirement for an Omega to have a registered patron in order to access basic services." A murmur ran through the room. Some shocked, some approving, some shocked and approving. "Healthcare, education, identification documents and housing," he continued. "These are rights, not perks. No citizen's access to them should depend on the generosity or whims of an individual alpha." My chest tightened. "Second," he said, "we're reallocating funds from the discretionary enforcement budget to expand and audit our public clinic system. Every district will have at least 1 Omega-focused clinic within the next 3 years, with fully transparent reporting on wait times, outcomes and incidents of discrimination." Lena's fingers danced over her tablet, likely pushing out the accompanying packet to the press in real time. "Third," he said. And here his voice dropped a notch, the words landing heavier. "Isolation centers will no longer be governed solely by internal enforcement. I'm establishing an independent oversight committee with representation from medical professionals, legal advocates, and Omega community members. No one gets sent to isolation because one alpha decides they're inconvenient." My stomach flipped. I'd done entire expose series on isolation center abuses. I'd sat in cramped kitchens with families whose Omegas had vanished behind those walls. I'd read the dry, sanitized reports that pretended unexpected complications meant anything other than we hurt them and don't want to say how, if he actually pulled this off. "We'll also be creating a permanent advisory council," he finished, "comprised of Omegas, Betas and Alphas from all districts. Their mandate, review and recommend changes to policies that affect bonded and unbonded Omegas alike. Their voice will not be symbolic. They will have access, data, and the authority to put proposals on the council's agenda." The words hung in the air. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then the room started to split, applause on one side, nervous whispers. On the other, reporters typing furiously, a council member shifting, with a storm cloud face, an Omega in the 3rd row wiping at their eyes with the back of their hand like they hadn't meant to cry. I pressed my tongue to my teeth out of habit and felt normal. No unexpected points. No threat of fangs. Just me, with no collar around my neck. It had been a month since it came off. No ceremony, no audience. Just a private room, a quiet click. His hand steady as he unfastened it and set it aside. It was still in his penthouse somewhere, probably in some secure drawer next to sensitive documents and spare cufflinks. We hadn't talked about whether he'd ever use it again. We hadn't talked about a lot of things. Today, at least. was about something bigger than us. These changes won't fix everything, Asher was saying now, somewhere between his final bullet point and the closing line. They won't undo the harm that's been done, or erase the fear some of you still carry every time you step into a government building. But they're a start, and I will not stop at a start. The applause this time was loud, genuine mostly. On the wings, Cap's mouth curved up at one corner like he approved, just a little. Lena's usual tension had shifted into something keen and focused. She liked good policy, even when it gave her more work. I realized my hands were shaking. I closed my fingers tighter around the article and forced a breath in, out. This wasn't one of my gray tail hit pieces. It wasn't a takedown or a manifesto. It was harsh where it needed to be, but it was also fair. Allowed for complexity, for growth, for the possibility that people might not stay exactly the thing you wrote on their forehead the first time you met them. The press Q&A started. Questions flew. Implementation, funding sources, enforcement resistance, timelines. One reporter lobbed in an obvious trap about caving to Omega activism. Asher deflected it with a raised brow and a pointed remark about protecting citizens not being caving to anything. I didn't hear every detail. My focus kept drifting to the way he stood, the way his shoulders squared when he said we, the way his gaze flicked once, instinctively, to the side of the stage where I stood. He didn't linger. He couldn't. But he looked. And I realized, with a clarity that felt like stepping into cold water, that this was the version of him I'd wanted to believe didn't exist. Not a saint. Not spotless. Still absolutely capable of terrible choices. But trying. And letting me see it. By the time the conference wrapped, and the room began to dissolve into clusters of conversation and camera breakdowns, my article felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my hands. Reyes. Cap had come up beside me without me hearing. I'd hate that if I didn't know he probably did it on purpose, just to mess with me. Yeah? I said. He wants to see you, Cap said. Office down the hall, don't run away. Makes my job annoying. I never run, I said automatically. He gave me a look that said I'd definitely run at least twice in his presence. Just go, he said. I went. The temporary backstage office was really just a conference room with better chairs. The door was half open. Inside, Asher stood by the window, tie loosened, suit jacket already off and hanging over the back of a chair. The city stretched behind him in slices between skyscrapers and sky. He didn't turn when I stepped in, but his shoulders shifted. Thought you'd be mobbed by reporters, I said, closing the door behind me. The lock snicked quietly. They're busy dissecting the numbers we released, he said. It'll take them at least half an hour to decide whether to call this a revolution or a distraction. And what is it? Work, he said simply. The kind you need a lot more of. He finally turned. For a second, neither of us said anything. The last month lived in the silence between us, the hospital, the removal of the collar, the nights in the penthouse where we passed each other in. Hallways like ghosts with hearts too loud, the days where we argued over policy language instead of whether or not I was allowed to have a phone. You're not wearing it, he observed quietly, gaze dropping briefly to my bare throat. I lifted my chin. You took it off. I did, he said. But that doesn't stop people from wondering. They'll deal, I said, or they won't. Either way, my neck can breathe. His mouth curved faintly. Then his gaze shifted to the paper in my hand. Is that it? He asked. Yeah. I hesitated. I'm not sure what to call it. An attack? He suggested, dry. A love letter? A very elaborate, I told you so. A review, I said. Honest. Some of it you won't like, some of it. I exhaled. Some of it, I didn't like writing. He held out his uninjured hand. I didn't move. He cocked his head slightly. Jay, you're not getting to read it first, I said. It's going out as is. No edits from your office, no pre-approval. I brought it because... I grimaced. Because I wanted you to know it's not a hit job. Not this time. Something shifted in his expression. A slow, quiet unlocking. I'll live with that, he said. I've survived worse from you. You still might, I said. I don't pull punches. I know. He paused. It means more if you don't. Silence fell again. He studied me, eyes tracing over my face, the way I fidgeted with the edge of the paper, the way my weight kept shifting from one foot to the other, as if my body hadn't decided whether to run or stay. You're free, he said finally. 2 words. They hit like a blow. No collar, no legal tie, no patron registry. Your name is off every isolation list, and the new protocols we introduced today mean no one can put it back there. Without going through layers of oversight and an advisory board that includes people who know your face. My throat went hot. You're free, he repeated quietly. What do you want to do with that? I laughed. It came out shaky. Big question, I said. I'm a big picture guy, he said. I looked down at my article, at my hands, at the faint indentation the collar used to leave on the skin of my neck when I wore it too long. What I've been doing, I said slowly, has value. The writing, the pushing, the yelling into the void until someone bothers to echo it. I want to keep doing that, just. I swallowed. Not from the outside only. Not like I've got nothing to lose. His gaze sharpened. Meaning, I said, lifting my eyes back to his. Freedom's a little overrated. When it's just you and your principles in a tiny apartment with bad plumbing. I've had the version where I fight alone. I want. The word stuck. I pushed it out anyway. I want to stand next to someone I chose. And keep annoying the hell out of him from there. His breath hitched, barely audible. Jay. You asked what I want to do with being free, I said. That's my answer. I want to keep you honest. I want to write what I see, even when it pisses you off. I want to be with someone who can look at what I am and not hand me to people with scalpels. I took a step forward. One more. We were close enough now that I could see the pulse in his throat, feel the warmth coming off his body, smell that layered scent of his that my instincts had memorized whether I liked it or not. I want to be with you, I said. The words terrifying and weirdly easy at the same time. Not because a system shoved me into your lap. Because I looked at everything. All of it. And I chose. His hand, still half extended from earlier, hung between us. I took it. His palm was warm, calloused in small places. A man who wrote all day shouldn't have calluses. I lifted it slowly, my own hand a little unsteady, and brought it up toward my neck. His eyes widened. Jay. I guided his hand to the place where the collar used to sit, where the skin was bare, and a little more sensitive now, like it remembered. His fingers brushed my throat, thumb resting against the flutter of my pulse. If there's anything circling my neck now, I said quietly, it's not metal. It's this. My choice. My stupid, inconvenient, probably dangerous choice. He swallowed. You understand what you're saying? He asked. There's no protection clause, no for as long as it's convenient. If you stay, we're in this. All the way. Politics, danger, whatever comes when people realize you don't belong in any of their tidy boxes. I smiled, small and sharp. Have I ever belonged in a tidy box? I asked. He huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh, then choked halfway into something softer. You are going to ruin my schedule, he said, a hint of that old dry humor bleeding back in, damp eyes and all. Every day. For the rest of my life. Every single one, I said. It's my calling. His hand tightened, just a little, at my neck. Not enough to trap. Just enough to anchor. For a second the world shrank to the two of us and the soft hum of the conference room's old ventilation system. The door was closed. The light from the window painted the side of his face in gold. He leaned in, slowly, giving me plenty of time to pull back. I didn't. Our foreheads bumped gently together, instead of anything more dramatic. It was stupid and tender and oddly perfect. A small, private collision instead of a cinematic kiss in front of a live feed. His breath ghosted over my mouth. Last chance to run, he murmured. Shut up and let me ruin your life, I whispered back. His lips brushed mine, light as a promise. Outside, the city churned on, laws to argue over, clinics to build, radicals to manage, a system to slowly pry open. We'd fight over all of it. We'd screw some things up. We'd fix others. We'd piss each other off regularly. But for the first time since I'd walked into his office and put my neck in a collar, the path ahead didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a choice. Mine.